And you could see a little about Ms. Bousquet, who she is. For those of us who don't know, Ms. Bousquet, Vice Consul, and she is going to be presented on the services offered by the Diaspora and Consulate. Ms. Bousquet, just allow me to bring up your presentation. I'm going to do that right now.
Okay, thank you, Rowan. While you're doing, first allow me to thank you for the invitation today and the ability to inform members of the diaspora of not only the consulates which are available in the North America area, but the services which we offer. I am not going to be able to cover all the services because there are a number of things that we do, but I will be covering the ones where we have the most frequent requests for. First of all, let me let everyone know that we have 4 consulates in North America. Let me begin with the embassy in Washington, D.C. This is the Embassy of St. Lucia to the United States and the OAS. It's headed by Ambassador Edmonds. And within the embassy, there is a consular division. So you can still get consular services from the embassy in Washington, D.C. Then there are the consulate generals in New York, in Miami, and in Ontario, Toronto, Ontario. Now, I want to make a distinction here because a lot of people get confused with New York. In New York, we have a permanent mission. The mission services the United Nations. That is headed by Ambassador Richardson. And their focus is on the United Nations, the various committees, and all St. Lucia's commitments to the United Nations. That is a separate body, a separate entity from the Consulate General. So I wanted to make that distinction right now. So when you call in or you have any questions as the diaspora, 9 times out of 10, you need to address it to the consulate and not to the mission. That being said, let me just go through with you quickly some of the services and the most requested services that we get at the Consulate General. The first one is passport applications. We cover, and passport applications can fall into 3 categories. They're the first-time applicants. First-time applicants are usually, well, being here in the US, they're usually people who have just acquired St. Lucian citizenship, either through marriage or, through their parents. And so they're applying for the very first time for their St. Lucian passports. Then, of course, the standard passport renewal, you have your passport, is expired and you need to renew it. There's also the passport replacement. This is for people who have lost their passports, and this happens a little too frequently. So I'm going to really encourage people to be very careful with their documents. It's a lot more detailed than regular passport renewals. There's an interview, you have to get police reports. It's a lot more complicated process. So, things happen, we understand that, and it's not always something that we can avoid, but also please be very careful with your documents. For any of these things, be it first-time renewals or replacement applications, there's some basic documents which you have to provide. So the first one would be your St. Lucia birth certificate. And I need to also make a distinction here between the birth certificate and the baptism certificate. For many years, St. Lucians were able to use the baptism certificate, which is a vertical form. At the top of it, it reads baptism and birth. While it was accepted for many years as a birth certificate, it is no longer accepted. In reality, this document is a church document and it's proof of your baptism in St. Lucia. It's not proof of you actually being born in St. Lucia. So about 11 years ago, St. Lucia now turned over and started using the actual baptism certificate. It is a horizontal form. It comes in different colors. It's blue, there's green, there's white, there's off-white. Some people say, oh, the green certificate. No, it comes in different colors. But it's a long horizontal form, and at the top of it, it reads birth in the district of. That is your birth certificate. But please ensure that your birth certificate has your name. So not only does it have your surname on there, but that it also has your Christian name and any middle names. So you need to have your birth certificate. Anyone ages 16 or over would also need to produce their NIC number. Some people have their valid ID cards, valid driver's licenses. If you don't have that, then we'd have to apply to NIC for verification of that number for you. So those are the basic things. And then from there, it's dependent on the particular situation. Some people may need a deed poll. Some people may need to produce marriage certificates or divorce decrees. So it's dependent on the particular application, what the particular requirements will be. And also note that all documents are original documents. They are returned to you once the process is being completed, but you do need to produce original documents. The next thing I want to cover is NIC. As I just indicated previously, anyone ages 16 and over have to produce the NIC number for passports, be it renewal, first time, or replacement applications. So someone who may have just turned 16 while they were here, they would be a first-time applicant. Someone, for example, may have gotten married or divorced, or may have changed their name for whatever reason. So then we would have to apply with what is called a change of particulars, that you can make that name change in St. Lucia, because the name on your NIC has to match the name on your passport application or on your St. Lucia ID card, whatever this particular situation is. So we can do the first time application if this is the very first time you're applying for an NIC number. If your name is being changed, we can also do the change of particulars to change that name for you. Again, NIC requires the same documentation like the passport, which would be the birth certificate, the divorce decree, marriage certificate, deed of change of names, whatever documents as proof of whatever it is that you're applying for. For NIC as well, we do life certificates. There are a number of St. Lucians who live in the US, but who collect their retirement benefits for St. Lucia. They worked in St. Lucia for a number of years, they've retired from their jobs, and so they have their pension benefits. To get those pension benefits, however, every 6 months, you need to submit a life certificate, and that has to be authenticated either through a notary public or through the consulate. The life certificate is really just to prove that you're still alive and that they can continue to pay out your funds for the next 6 months. So you can come into the consulate and we will authenticate it and submit it for you so that your funds are continued to be deposited. Emergency travel documents, that's a big one. And especially at this time of year where so many people are planning on traveling home. And unfortunately, many people book their tickets and do not check to see whether their passports are valid. So this is another thing I'm going to encourage you. If you're planning a trip, before you book that ticket, check your passport. Make sure your passport is still valid. There's so many situations where people come in and they have a ticket, they're traveling, the next day in some instances, and their passport has been expired for a year, 2 years, or 3 years. Now, the only time we can assist you with an emergency travel document is if you're traveling to St. Lucia. Emergency travel documents are not valid for travel anywhere else. So if you're going to Mexico, you're going to the DR, you're going to Europe, and your passport is expired, unfortunately, you're going to have to rebook that trip. However, if you're traveling to St. Lucia, we can issue the emergency travel document, which will take you into St. Lucia, but you will have to get your passport renewed for your return trip to the US, because obviously you cannot re-enter the US, regardless of whether you're a green card holder or not. You cannot re-enter the US on a travel document. You have to re-enter with a valid passport. So we can get you to St. Lucia, ensure that you've given yourself enough time to get your passport renewed. The other thing, and Ambassador Dubois mentioned this earlier, was the Registry of Civil Status. There are still a number of people who have issues with their birth certificates, where rectifications are needed because their names are not on their birth certificates, or perhaps a parent's name. Some people find, for example, their parents were married, they signed the father's name, but the father's name, although it was on the baptism certificate, is not on the birth certificate, and so rectifications have to be done. There are various situations. Sometimes a name is spelled incorrectly and there's a change that needs to be done to the spelling of a name. So there are a number of things which have to be done, all of which would require either the witnessing of an affidavit. Sometimes it requires a statutory declaration, or sometimes it's just a simple birth certificate application where you've had your birth certificate or your marriage certificate and you just need to get a new copy. So this can also be done through the consulate. Let me just point out that the affidavits, the witnessing of the affidavits and the statutory declarations, you have an option of not coming to the consulate. You can go outside and get it signed by a notary public in the US. However, if you do get it signed by a notary public, you will also be required to get what is called an apostille certificate. The apostille is an authentication document. It authenticates that the notary who signed your document is licensed to practice in the area where it was signed. And this, depending on where you live, some states you actually have to mail the document into the state capitals, and then they mail it back to you. Some places like New York, it's a 3-step process where you have to get it notarized, and you need to get an authentication document from the notary, and then you go to the state certification office, which is in Lower Manhattan, to get the actual apostille certificate. So it can be a bit tiresome to get the apostille. So it's always easier if you come into the consulate, because once we witness and sign the documents for you, then there's no apostille required. You can just send the documents straight down to whoever is handling the application on your behalf. The other thing is the tax ID, which Rohan also mentioned earlier. There are many St. Lucians who are undocumented in the US, but you're able to work and pay taxes in the US. And your taxes you can pay if you have what is called an ITIN, which is an individual tax identification number. When you're applying for your tax ID number, you go first to the accountant who would normally be doing your taxes, and they prepare the application for you. But when submitting the application, one of the things which the IRS requires is an authenticated copy of your valid ID, photo ID. So for most people, they bring in their passports, and the consulate is able to verify that the passport is yours and it is an authentic passport issued by the immigration department in St. Lucia. We authenticate that. We issue a letter for the IRS that goes into a sealed envelope from the consulate, and you submit that along with the application which was prepared by your tax consultant, and you send that off to the IRS. Please, I beg of you, do not send your original passports. There has been occasions where people send up their original passport to the IRS when applying for the ITN number, and I guarantee you, you're not getting that passport back. So please bring in the passport, get the authentication from the consulate, and then send that authentication letter from the consulate along with those documents. So these are the top 5 things I would say that people ask for. Other things we get frequently, but it's not as much as those top 5 things, would be the witnessing and signing of documents. People who are preparing power of attorneys, you know, for, again, people have property in St. Lucia, they have their accounts in St. Lucia, and so they want to authorize a friend or family member to take care of their business for them, so they're power of attorneys. Sometimes people are doing deed polls, deed of change of name, and there are other legal documents which have to be witnessed and authenticated. Again, you can go to a notary public and get an apostille certificate to send down with it, but most attorneys, most entities prefer that you come into the consulate and it is witnessed by a consular officer. That way you don't require an apostille, but also that they know that we do our due diligence and ensure that the person who's signing the document is of sound mind when the document is signed. Citizenship applications. Especially in the last couple of years, the last 3 to 5 years, but especially the last year, we've had a lot of inquiries around St. Lucia's citizenship. The consulates general do not process citizenship applications. What we can do is we can provide you with the application, we can provide you with basic information on citizenship application, and then of course refer you to the persons at the Ministry of Home Affairs in St. Lucia who actually process the citizenship applications. Just quickly, I can inform you that if you are a born St. Lucian, so you were born in St. Lucia like myself, but you have a child who was born outside of St. Lucia, be it in the US, Canada, England, wherever, that child will get citizenship or is entitled to citizenship in St. Lucia through you, because they're getting citizenship by descent. They're descendants of a born St. Lucian. As a born St. Lucian, you can also get citizenship for your spouse. So if you get married, you can get citizenship for your husband or for your wife. You cannot, however, give citizenship to your grandchildren. So unfortunately, the laws at this time do not allow for citizenship to be passed on to grandchildren. And unfortunately as well, if you acquired citizenship through your parents, you cannot give citizenship to your children. So your children can only get citizenship from you if you were the person who was actually born in St. Lucia and did not acquire citizenship from your parents. There are a number of other ways. You know, there's the citizenship by investment program and years reside on island, etc. I won't go into all of that, but if anyone needs information, of course, you can call the consulate. The other thing is the certificate of identity. The certificate of identity is not an ID card. St. Lucia ID cards, you have to be on island to apply for a new ID card or the renewal of your ID card. That cannot be done through the consulate or anywhere off island. You have to be physically in St. Lucia. However, the consulate can offer a certificate which verifies your identity. We don't use this as much now as we used to, because now there are a number of ways you can get your driver's license now, even if you're undocumented. New York City offers the city ID card. So there are a number of ID cards which are recognized, but some people, for various reasons, still require a certificate of identity because there are certain things which people do, and if they don't have valid ID, or sometimes they have valid ID, but the particular agency may require secondary identification from their country of birth. So they would need to come in for a certificate of identity. The last thing I want to touch on, and this is for no reason other than I know a lot of people don't understand the difference. Visas. We do deal with visas. However, the visas which we process and issue are visas for foreigners. These are people who are nationals of other countries like the Dominican Republic, Colombia, etc., who require a visa to enter St. Lucia. So we only process visas for people who are going to St. Lucia for business or vacation. If you're a St. Lucian and you're looking for information on how to apply for your US visa or renew your US visa or your Canadian visa, unfortunately, the consulate is not in a position to assist you. Not only because we don't deal with that, but we're actually not allowed to do that because this is a matter for the US or the Canadian governments. So sorry, we can't help you with that. There are a number of other services, like I mentioned earlier, that we offer. You're free to give us a call. You know, if there's anything that you need to get done and you think that the consulate may be able to assist you, please call us, email us, and ask the question. You know, there's never a dumb question. And then we can certainly, if we can provide you the information, we will certainly point you in the right direction. I know this slide, it's a whole lot of information on here. And Ron mentioned earlier that he will be sending out slides. So please ensure that you send this one in particular, because it is the address for the 4 consulates in North America. Again, the embassy in Washington, D.C., the Consulate General in New York, the Consulate General in Miami, and the Consulate General in Toronto, Ontario. The final thing I do want to mention is that none of the consulates general have outside agencies. We do not have authorized agents. We do not have a satellite office or anything of that nature. It is simply the 4 consulate generals in the US and in North America. So if you are dealing with any other entity, if you're not coming to one of our physical offices for service, then you are not dealing with a representative of the government of St. Lucia. And I want people to be very mindful of that. There are only the 4 consulates. If you need service, you need to come to one of our 4 locations or deal with our staff at one of the 4 locations for services, not anyone else outside, because they are not representatives of the government. I thank you for your time. this evening. I thank you, Mr. Fenelon, for putting this together and inviting the consulates